On our anniversary night, my father-in-law kept insulting me, but when I finally spoke back, my husband slapped me hard across the face in front of 600 guests. Everyone laughed at me. I wiped my tears, walked away, and made one single phone call. Dad, please come. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. The sting on my cheek burned like a lit match held against my skin. My vision blurred for a fraction of a second. The chandeliers above, fracturing into sharp points of light. The grand ballroom of the Charlotte Country Club fell dead silent. The string quartet halting mid-note. Then the whispers started. The clinking of crystal champagne glasses mixed with the cruel, low chuckles of the city elite. Garrett stood there rubbing his knuckles, his chest puffed out, entirely proud of his sudden violence. Cole, his father, just swirled his expensive bourbon and smirked, validating his son's absolute cruelty. I tasted copper in my mouth. I swallowed the blood, squared my shoulders, and turned my back on the entire room. The heavy oak doors of the ballroom slammed shut behind me, completely severing their laughter from my reality. The marble hallway felt freezing against my bare arms. I gripped my phone so tight my knuckles turned white, pressing the cold glass to my ear. Garrett did not let me just walk away with my dignity. He chased me down the grand corridor, his heavy leather shoes echoing against the marble floor. He caught up to me right at the valet stand, grabbing my upper arm with bruising force and dragging me violently out from under the covered awning into a freezing North Carolina downpour. The icy rain soaked through my thin silk dress in an instant, plastering the fabric to my shivering skin. He shoved me backward toward the flooded curb. I stumbled, my heels catching on the wet pavement, and caught my balance against a wet stone pillar. He reached into his tailored tuxedo jacket, pulled out a crumpled $500 bill, and threw it directly at my bruised face. The paper hit my cheek and fluttered down into a muddy puddle near my feet. He sneered, his breath reeking of expensive scotch, telling me to go back to the dirt where he found me. He told me I was nothing, a pathetic charity case who finally overstepped her bounds and needed to be put back in her place. Then Cody, my ruthless corporate lawyer, brother-in-law, stepped out onto the sheltered stone porch. He did not even bother to raise his voice over the roaring thunder. He just smiled, that sickening, clinical smile he always wore right before destroying someone on the witness stand. He casually informed me that my personal bank accounts were completely empty. He had used a buried clause in a financial power of attorney document I signed years ago, a document intentionally slipped into a massive stack of complex tax returns to completely drain my $400,000 life savings. Every single cent I had earned preserving and restoring historic homes across the state was gone in an instant. They thought isolation, physical violence, and sudden extreme poverty would break my spirit on that wet pavement. They thought I was a helpless nobody without a single ally in the world. They thought isolation would destroy me. But they did not know I was just waiting for my ride. Blinding white headlights pierced the heavy sheets of rain. 3 identical black Cadillac Escalades glided up the circular driveway, their massive engines humming in perfect, intimidating synchronization. The lead vehicle stopped directly between me and Garrett, shielding me from his arrogant gaze. The rear door swung open. A security detail holding a massive black umbrella stepped out, followed immediately by my father. Gavin Reynolds was a man whose mere presence shifted the gravity and temperature in any room he entered. He stepped into the violent storm wearing a bespoke charcoal overcoat, his sharp dark eyes locking instantly onto the red, swelling mark across my left cheek. Garrett's arrogant smirk completely vanished. The blood rapidly drained from his cheeks as my father walked forward and wrapped his heavy, dry cashmere coat around my shivering shoulders. I looked back at Garrett from the safety of the warm leather interior. The absolute sheer panic and confusion in his eyes was glorious. He had just thrown his wife out like worthless trash. Having absolutely no idea he had physically assaulted the sole heir to Reynolds Global. The next morning, the sky over Charlotte was completely clear. But the cold fury in my chest burned hotter than ever. I did not waste a single second shedding tears over my broken marriage. I walked straight into my local bank branch in the financial district. I bypassed the tellers, walked into the branch manager's glass office, and placed my identification on his desk. My name was still the primary holder on the drained personal account, giving me absolute legal right to the internal transaction records. Within 10 minutes, the manager handed me the official wire trace report. The crisp paper confirmed Cody had transferred my $400,000 into a specific corporate escrow shell company. I took that document straight to the towering glass skyscraper that housed the executive penthouse of Reynolds Global headquarters, where my father's elite acquisitions team was already standing by, waiting for my orders. We cross-referenced the destination routing numbers against our internal corporate files. And what we found was a level of arrogant stupidity that almost defied basic human logic. The Bennett family's supposedly prestigious wealth management firm was completely underwater, drowning in massive toxic commercial real estate debt. To save their collapsing legacy, they had desperately submitted a highly classified application for a $300 million corporate bailout, and they submitted it directly to Reynolds Global. The mandatory liquidity they claimed to have on their balance sheet, the unencumbered cash required to even qualify for our preliminary review, was exactly $400,000. Cody had maliciously stolen my life savings to illegally inflate their corporate liquidity. It was textbook, premeditated federal wire fraud. Blatantly signed by both Garrett and Cody, I did not just sit on that lethal criminal twist. I pulled up their secondary commercial debt file, which our firm already held in a massive bundled portfolio. The Bennetts were 60 days delinquent on the heavy loans tying up their pristine family estate and their downtown corporate offices. Cody had arrogantly signed the standard default and acceleration clauses months ago, blindly assuming they could just restructure the debt whenever they pleased. I triggered the immediate default protocols right then and there. I set an inescapable legal trap. And then I formally scheduled their final bailout signing ceremony for 2 o'clock that very afternoon. Garrett and Cody strutted into the Reynolds Global headquarters like they owned the entire eastern seaboard. The security cameras tracked their arrogant posture from the marble lobby all the way to the 60th floor. They walked into the airtight glass boardroom, completely oblivious that they were willingly stepping into a perfectly designed execution chamber. I watched them on the high-definition monitors from my private office down the hall. They laughed loudly and high-fived. They poured sparkling water into crystal glasses, celebrating a victory they had not yet secured. Garrett even pulled out his phone and texted my dead, disconnected number, mocking my poverty, bragging about his impending $300 million triumph, and reminding me that I was a completely disposable nobody. Their massive, towering egos blinded them to the reality that they were trapped in a cage of their own making, entirely at the mercy of the woman they discarded the night before. The heavy mahogany doors of the boardroom swung open with a resounding thud. I walked in wearing a sharply tailored emerald green suit, flanked by our top 5 corporate litigators holding thick red folders. I walked straight past them to the head of the massive petrified wood table and took my seat in the high-backed executive vice president chair. The silence in that room became heavy, absolute, and suffocating. Garrett's jaw actually dropped open. His eyes darted frantically around the room, trying desperately to process why the woman he threw in the freezing rain was sitting in the throne he was begging for. Cody completely froze, his hand hovering uselessly over a water glass, the color rapidly washing out of his face as his brilliant legal mind finally connected the dots of his own destruction. Garrett tried to stammer out a pathetic apology. He literally choked on his own saliva, his voice cracking as he begged for his marriage, claiming he was just stressed about the firm and did not mean what happened at the gala. I held up one hand, silencing his pathetic, high-pitched whimpering instantly. I did not raise my voice or show a single ounce of anger. I simply slid the wire fraud trace across the polished table. Placing it directly over his fraudulent bailout application, I informed them in a steady, cold voice that the $300 million lifeline was officially and permanently denied. Garrett snapped. Driven by pure panic and the terrifying realization of his failure, he grabbed the printed wire trace, ripped it into tiny pieces, and screamed that I was a delusional liar. He tried to gaslight the entire room, shouting frantically that it was a fake document and demanding to speak to my father. I smiled, leaning forward in my heavy leather chair. I told him tearing up a piece of paper does not magically delete the encrypted digital copies I had already forwarded directly to the federal authorities. Right at that exact second, Cody's phone buzzed violently on the table. It was Brianna, Garrett's incredibly spiteful sister. Her frantic, screaming voice echoed loudly through the quiet boardroom via voicemail. She had tried to buy a $20,000 designer watch at a luxury boutique using their corporate expense card, and it was violently declined in front of the store manager and a dozen wealthy socialites. All their accounts were completely frozen. The dual-screen defeat was absolute poetry. To deliver the final, crushing blow, I reached into my leather portfolio and handed Garrett the immediate foreclosure and eviction notices for his luxury estate. I legally seized his home, mirroring the exact moment he locked me out in the cold. Cole Bennett, who had been sitting quietly next to his son, suddenly clutched his chest. The sheer shock of losing his generational wealth and his pristine reputation caused a severe panic attack. The great patriarch collapsed against the table, and we had to call paramedics to humiliatingly wheel him out of the glass room on a stretcher while his son wept on the floor. The civil ruin was absolute and entirely undeniable. But Garrett still could not accept his utter defeat. He attempted one last, calculated act of desperate revenge. He knew my downtown field office safe held the physical, original historical preservation grants that secured my independent funding for the city projects. That night, under the cover of darkness, he drove to my downtown Charlotte restoration site. He broke in by bypassing the heavy padlock using an old contractor code we shared years ago. He walked into the historic building carrying a heavy metal gas can, intending to burn the precious documents to ashes so I would lose my funding and come crawling back to him for support. But his pathetic execution failed entirely. I had recently upgraded the historic site to silent, motion-activated cloud cameras. Sitting comfortably in the safety of my penthouse, sipping herbal tea, I got the alert on my phone. I watched his desperate, pathetic silhouette creeping through the dark on a pristine 4K resolution screen. And I forwarded the live feed straight to the police dispatch. The Charlotte police ambushed Garrett before he could even strike a match. He was tackled to the floorboards and arrested on the spot for felony arson. By the very next morning, Cody's prestigious law firm was violently raided by federal agents collecting evidence of his massive wire fraud. Garrett traded his tailored bespoke suits and luxury cars for a 15-year criminal sentence in a state penitentiary. I walked away completely unbothered, fully empowered, and finally free of their toxic gravity. 6 months have passed since the night Garrett was arrested in the dark, and my life looks completely unrecognizable. The judge sentenced him to 15 years in state prison, with no eligibility for early parole. The court also ordered full restitution of my $400,000, forcing the Bennett family to liquidate the last remnants of their personal assets to cover the penalty. The local news ran the story of their massive corporate fraud on the front page for weeks. Cody was permanently disbarred, his reputation completely ruined, and he is currently awaiting his own federal trial. Brianna and Cole were exiled from the Charlotte Country Club, forced to move into a tiny rented apartment on the outskirts of the city. They lost their money, their status, and their pride. A few weeks ago, I received a letter in the mail bearing a prison return address. It was from Garrett. He filled 3 pages with frantic, sprawling handwriting, begging for my forgiveness, blaming his father for the pressure, and trying to guilt-trip me by reminding me of the good times we supposedly shared early in our marriage. He wrote that he was still my husband in the eyes of God and that I owed him a second chance. I did not get angry. I did not cry. I did not even finish reading the second page. I calmly walked over to the paper shredder in my home office, fed the letter into the humming machine, and watched his manipulative words turn into worthless confetti. I did not reply. I proved to myself, once and for all, that I had completely moved on. My life is now filled with profound peace. I spend my days working alongside my father, expanding our philanthropic efforts, and restoring historic properties that provide transitional housing for survivors of domestic abuse. I surround myself with a chosen family of brilliant, supportive friends and colleagues who respect my boundaries and celebrate my victories. The stark contrast between the quiet, steady peace of my present and the chaotic, screaming toxicity of my past is a daily reminder of exactly what I survived. Let me be entirely clear with you. The real tragedy in this story is not that I spent a decade married to a man who secretly despised me. The tragedy is that I spent 10 years shrinking myself down to fit into a space that was never meant to hold my true potential. I hid my lineage, my wealth, and my true power because I desperately wanted to prove I could be loved for my character, not my trust fund. But in doing so, I became a convenient, quiet target for parasites. Narcissistic abusers like Garrett and Cody do not use financial control, isolation, and physical intimidation because they are strong. They use those tactics because they are profoundly incompetent and deeply insecure. They need to keep you small, confused, and dependent because your potential growth absolutely terrifies them. When you strip away their tailored suits, their country club memberships, and their arrogant posturing, you find hollow, fragile men desperate for constant validation. Garrett needed to slap me in front of 600 people just to feel like a powerful man. Cody needed to steal from a family member to feel like a brilliant legal mastermind because he lacked the actual intelligence to save his firm legally. Their entire empire was built on an illusion of superiority, propped up by stolen money and incredibly fragile egos. I learned 3 vital rules from standing in that freezing rain. Rules that I carry with me into every single boardroom and relationship today. Rule number 1. True power is silent. Insecurity is incredibly loud. The Bennetts needed extravagant galas, designer clothes, and public violence to assert their dominance. They needed everyone to look at them, envy them, and fear them. I did not need to shout. I did not need to throw a tantrum on the street. I just needed a single signature on a foreclosure notice. When you truly hold the cards, you never have to announce it. Rule number 2. Never shrink yourself to fit a table that does not respect your worth. I compromised my boundaries for a decade, hoping my quiet endurance would eventually buy their genuine loyalty. It did not. It only bought their absolute disrespect. When you constantly lower your standards to keep the peace in a toxic environment, you teach abusers that your boundaries are entirely negotiable. You give them explicit permission to exploit you. Stop trying to prove your value to people who are completely committed to misunderstanding and diminishing you. Rule number 3. Karma is most effective when you actively facilitate the paperwork. We are often told to just walk away, to let the universe handle our abusers, to take the high road and blindly forgive. But forgiveness without accountability is just enabling bad behavior. Sometimes, the universe needs a little bit of help. Relying on unseen forces to deliver justice is simply not enough. You must enforce your own boundaries, demand your legal rights, and ensure that the people who try to destroy you face the absolute, undeniable consequences of their own malicious actions. If you take away nothing else from my story, please hear this deeply. Look closely at the people sitting at your dinner table, in your boardroom, and in your life. Are they truly celebrating your growth? Or are they quietly hoping you stay small enough for them to control? Pay close attention to how they react when you set a firm boundary, when you say no, or when you achieve something they cannot take credit for. The mask always slips when you stop playing the quiet, compliant role they assigned you. Do not wait for a physical slap in a crowded ballroom to realize you are sleeping next to the enemy. Blood does not make you family. Mutual respect and fierce loyalty do. You are allowed to walk away from people who hurt you, even if you share a last name, a mortgage, or a long history. Trust is earned, not owed by default. You are entirely capable of rebuilding a life that honors your strength and your dignity. Let me know in the comments if you have ever had to cut ties with a toxic family member. And share this video with someone who desperately needs the strength to walk away today.